everybody. That was a very interesting session from Teresa Torres on discovery. I think more so now than ever, the importance of continuous discovery is with us, as the world is changing so rapidly. So thank you for that session, Teresa. Thank you, Rakesh, for getting her to join us. And, with that, we will come to our session today. It promises to be a very exciting session. This session is going to be on growth, right? And we have two great speakers who will come talk to us about growth. Because, if you are a product manager, a product leader, or a founder, one of the things that you care the most about is growth, right? Whether it's the growth of your product or your business. So we want to, have you come in, join us, listen to two very different perspectives. One is B2B, another is a B2C. So we would love to have them share their perspective. And for the audience, I would say, please keep your questions coming. We'll try to accommodate them as much as possible. And if not, we'll try to do some follow-up posts to hear from our panelists, right? And with that, let me call on stage, Michal Russ. She's a technology executive with Walmart, where she runs their international e-commerce division. That's a division with 1,000 people and over 6 billion in terms of revenue. So please welcome on stage Michal Russ. And Michal is joining us from California. So thank you for being up at an unearthly hour to join us. We appreciate that. And let me also call on stage Manoj Apte, Dr. Manoj Apte. He has a PhD in aerospace. He is the Chief Product and Strategy Officer of Zscaler. And he's been with Zscaler from the time it was a scrappy startup and grown it all the way to an IPO in 2018. And they are now a $500 million company with a valuation of $25 billion. So I'm sure he has a lot to share in terms of how he worked on that. So with that, I'll welcome Manoj. Thank you for joining us. Manoj also is in California, so that's great. Thank you both. And I think the way we'll do it is I will first hand it over to you, Michal, and then Manoj. And I'll request you to give us a little bit of your story, which will be your background, what you are doing, what's been your approach to building and scaling. So, take a couple of minutes. I would want the audience to understand, who you are and where you are coming from. So with that, over to you, Michal. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Kaustubh. Thank you for inviting me and for having me here today. It really is a true pleasure, to join you guys and talk a bit about product and product growth. I assume many of the folks on this call know Walmart, world's Fortune 1 company with over $500 billion in annual revenue. Really amazing company. We have over 260 million customers that actually visit our 11,000 stores in 26 countries every week, as well as our multiple websites. My role in the company, I lead Walmart International e-commerce technology, like you mentioned. It's a team of over 1,000 members that basically builds our omni-channel experiences and services for 3 of our major e-commerce markets, for Canada, Mexico, and the UK. Our team actually has, a majority of my team actually sits in India. We have a really large tech hub in Bangalore as well as in some other cities. And, those teams include engineering, UX, and obviously product managers. I have to say, from experience, living in one location, in my case, living in the US and serving customers that are across the world on a daily basis is actually a really complex task and one that cannot be taken for granted. So I really discovered this passion and dedication for empathy and understanding customers, even in other locations. I've seen a lot of that actually in the scene in Bangalore and really enjoy working with a lot of the folks on the team that we have from there. Prior to Walmart, I've held several product roles with varied seniority in several consumer-focused companies, really focused on the B2C, mainly e-commerce, taken part in the growing pains and the excitement of the small startups and the medium startups, and always roll up my sleeves and get involved when the scale was almost impossible to comprehend. And like I said, today really focused on these three markets: Canada, Mexico, and the UK.
Excellent. Thank you, Michal, for the introduction. I think great story. The size and scale is fascinating. And with that, Manoj, please go ahead. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So from the biggest company on the planet to a much smaller space. So Zscaler is a company that securely connects users, applications, services, workloads to each other without regard to what network they might be in. In a world where everyone is mobile, everything is in cloud or in many, many clouds and cloud applications, nobody has control over the network. Internet is kind of your corporate network now. And so ensuring that IT has a consistent ability to provide security, to have visibility, and at the same time enable employees, users, applications to have great experience and performance is kind of the idea that Zscaler started. We started the company in 2008 with a view towards the future. That we believed that, by the way, just anecdotally, this was before iPad was invented, right? And so I have to give kudos to my founder, Jay, who had a phenomenal vision of where the world is going. And so we embarked on a very ambitious journey, quite honestly, where there was no obvious end in sight at that point, right? It wasn't like, oh yeah, cloud is here, like Office 365 and all of that was not even imagined. Or maybe it was imagined, it wasn't around. And so we started on that journey in 2008 when we were young. I joined to run product management, but when we were small, I ran engineering, marketing, sales engineers, whatever else needs to be done, right? When you're a small company, you roll up your sleeves, as Michal was saying. Apparently, even in Walmart, she's still rolling up her sleeves. But yes, for a small company, we were doing a lot of things. And then as we continued to grow, things like compliance, sales enablement of a large field organization, all of that was my responsibility. As we've grown to about 2,500 or 3,000 employees now, I'm now bringing my focus back primarily on product and strategy and serve as the chief strategy officer of the company. So that's a quick brief about what my journey has been. Of course, before Zscaler, I was with Juniper Networks and a bunch of networking and security companies. I have been in networking and security for a while. It's an evergreen topic because there's always new problems every morning, right, to solve. So it's exciting. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great. Great to have both of you. And it's very interesting that both of you are now leading such large orgs, but the attitude remains the same, which is, you're still ready to roll up your sleeves and jump in. So that is certainly appreciated. With that, one of the things I want to, sort of help our audience understand is, what is growth, right? Because you come from such, different companies and different, styles of growth and what is revenue and margins and everything. I thought, why don't we start with that? Manoj, you want to go first? Tell us a little bit about, what growth means to you. And then Michal will come to you for the same question. Go ahead.
Sure. So growth at the end of the day means you're growing the company top line, right? And you're going to grow your revenue via various aspects. It's either the number of products that you've brought to market, the way you bring value to your customer has to keep increasing every year with new problems that you're solving that enables you to generate more revenue. As more revenue happens, growth of all kinds happens, right? Whether it is growth in sales, growth in the number of engineers you have, growth in the ability for you to drive more. Finally, it is being able to target bigger problems and bring bigger value to your customers. That's how I look at growth.
Yeah, I agree. I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what company or what industry you're in. It's about growing the revenue, and it's about growing the customer base. I think what's unique when you think about B2C as opposed to B2B is that within B2C, the switching costs usually are actually pretty low. And so the fact that you acquired a customer doesn't mean you're going to retain them. So when you're in the B2C industry and you talk about growth, retention, and the focus on how to create loyalty or an emotional connection with the customer is an inherent part of the growth equation. And that's something that you focus on a lot. And just to add on to what Manoj was saying, I think, when you think about growth, it could be around new segments, new markets, new products, new features, things like that. But it could also be this, not just creating new initiatives, but within your existing product, within your existing funnel, how do you continuously optimize the funnel throughout the whole journey, throughout the whole customer journey, to find these little tweaks that actually enable to increase customer engagement or user engagement in the case of B2B?
Sure. Thanks for sharing that. I have a sort of follow-up question to that. Both of you talked about revenue, top-line growth, customer-based growth, and you brought up a very interesting thing, which is, in the B2C, retention is key, right? Because cost of switching is low. And often when we hear about consumer-focused companies talking about growth, they obsess over a metric, ARPU, right? Average revenue per user. And I don't know if there is an equivalent or the same concept for B2B, but I'd first love to hear from you on what are some of the metrics which you track or you use. Obviously retention you mentioned, but give us a little window into what keeps you up at night, or what you as a team obsess or focus on in terms of growth.
So I think that it's really interesting because, like I said, I have multiple markets. And in it, I actually have multiple businesses in various maturity levels. So it's really interesting to see the difference between them. I would say there are key metrics that you always have everywhere, right? Rather than ARPU, we talk about lifetime value per customer, right? Basically, how much does it cost us to acquire a customer? And then, the frequency, retention, and obviously the basket size. That's very basic, in the world of e-commerce. And that's something we focus on. But like I said, it really depends on the business itself and the maturity. So for example, in an apparel business that we have in the UK, a key metric we look at that drives retention is returns. And can we get customers to find the right size, right? In an online grocery business, and if you think about India, for example, if you were to think of an on-demand business, if you were to think of Swiggy or Zomato, you really want to make sure that the delivery gets to the customer on time with exactly everything they wanted, which usually isn't something you would think about when you think of a traditional e-commerce business. It's pretty obvious we can deliver things on time, but when it's really on demand, that's the focus. And so in general, when we look at growth, we look a lot at retention. And when we look at retention, the retention itself and the elements of retention are really driven by the type of product that you sell and the type of service that you're providing.
Very interesting. I think it's interesting you talk about the various stages of growth, right, in the different target markets. And, we'll certainly come back to that in terms of, what changes, right? But before we jump into that, Manoj, tell us a little bit about, what are some of the metrics you track? And, I think some of it sounds very similar, right? Lifetime value, cost of acquisition. Obviously the margins, I am assuming, would be much, much better than what you did.
Exactly. And I was just going to say that is that it's the same, right? Cost of acquisition is key. But the big difference that I am hearing between what Michal has to do versus what I have to do, once I get a customer, I have to maximize the ARPU right there, right? I have one engagement. And in retail, they're going after the same customer, coming and buying, like they'll have like 50 engagements through the year. I will have one, two, or at most three engagements through the year with a customer. And so the key becomes, how do you put the customer on a journey that ensures that they can get more and more value out of your platform, right? They're not going to go come in and say, yeah, give me everything you got, right? They're coming here to solve a problem. So how do you make sure that you solve the problem that they have, at the same time leverage that to make them aware of the other problems that our company can help them with, and provide them a journey where they can keep coming back to look for more as they need more, right? But our frequency is much lower than the frequency for Michal. However, the good thing is we also don't have the retention craziness that consumer has, right? Like you have Walmart and Amazon and 15 other sites, you just click and go. It's not quite as easy to switch in B2B business, which makes it a little more peaceful for me, I think, compared to what they are doing. But at the end of the day, ARPU and margins are the key metrics, right? And you grow your revenue per user, not just based on multiple products that you can provide, right? Of course, my revenue per user grows if you come here for tomatoes and then I sell you broccoli and I sell you something else, right? Same thing in security as well. You came for one type of security, I'm now providing you data protection, I'm providing you a few other tweaks. That increases your revenue, but it also increases the cost at which you are providing it, right? However, if you are able to increase the value of what you are doing by being differentiated from the market, your ARPU grows much better that way. So creating differentiation in the market is huge for B2B, where it improves my retention, improves my margin, improves my revenue in a more sustainable manner, as long as I can create enough distinction by creating things that the customers value that they just can't find in the market.
Right, right. No, that's very interesting, Manoj. I think in a way you started touching on, how you drive growth, right? So it sounds like one of the key ways you do that is by differentiation and innovation, right? So tell us a little bit about that, and then I'll, just as a follow-up, and then I'll go back to Mihal, because, I'm sure their approach to retention and, experience is going to be very different. But just add a little bit in terms of, how you drive growth, right? Clearly, differentiation is one aspect of it. Is service, what else, right? How do you drive?
So actually, now I find myself thinking about all the differences between our life and consumer life, right? Is to drive growth, right? It is about finding the problems that are prevalent across the industry, right? The broad theme that we could see is mobility and cloud are going to change the way enterprises work. So when we engage, growth comes from us engaging with the customers directly, going and sitting as product managers, understanding the lives of our enterprises, of the IT leadership there, of the decisions that they have to make, and the shortcomings they have from technology of yesterday, right? That they have to leverage now to address new challenges. And so the only way you can bring about growth is if you are truly engaged with your customer. That is number one, right? That you are, every opportunity that you get to to talk to your prospects. You are asking them about their life to the point where you can write a user story back to your engineer saying, okay, there's this guy named John. He has black coffee in the morning because he's so stressed about the dashboard that he's going to see in the morning. He has to be like, go, 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 right? You have to understand what causes them grief so that you can build value. When you start thinking like that, the differentiation becomes automatic, because at the end of the day, not everyone is that deep into customers, right? They're answering their sales, they're answering their engineers, they're answering something else, not the final end user. So get close to the end user, growth happens automatically then.
Very, very interesting. And I love the way you put it, all the way right down to the user stories, right? Most startups talk about that, but, once you hit that kind of scale, people sort of gloss over it. So I think it's very interesting to hear that from you. Even at this scale, you are still, very focused on staying connected with the person who is going to be eventually affected and understanding their problems. So, great story there. We'll go back to Michal.
I would love to know how Michal goes and talks to all of her consumers.
It's a challenge. It really is. Like I said, I lead Mexico, Canada, and the UK, and I don't speak Spanish. And I have, a Spanish-speaking consumer. It's always a challenge. But I think that's where, Manoj, I'm sure you're the same, product and UX, product and research working together. It's this partnership that the moment product and UX start drifting away, I think there is a serious problem. And it's really something you want to focus on as a product leader, is how do you continuously engage with your customers? How do you continuously do usability studies and ethnographic studies and really getting to understand them? I'll say, on my IT, what we do a lot, well, not this year because we can't really travel, but in previous years, whenever I would travel to any of my markets, I would go and work in a store. I would work in a store. I would see my customers. I would use the apps that we create for the associates, because in my case, the associates are also my users. I would actually engage with them. I would use the apps. I would see what it's like, checking inventory after 7 hours of being on my feet and serving customers, because that feeling after 7 hours where you're already tired and you're waiting for your shift to end and it takes 3 seconds to load is when you realize, oh my God, speed really matters here. And so really, Manoj, just like you said, building that empathy, focusing on your user, whoever your user is, that is key for any good product.
That is amazing, Michal. That is really, really remarkable that you.
We have to do it.
That's why Walmart is Walmart. Well done.
I think, you again brought up some very interesting points, that you're actually serving markets where, you don't even speak the language, right? And, understanding the users and also the perspective that your employees are also your key users, right? Because you're enabling that experience for them. I think that's very interesting. And, one of the things I wanted to sort of go back to when you responded to a previous question was you said that, the different markets that you are working with are at different stages of growth, right? So I think that leads us into a nice discussion on, we talked about the metrics, we talked about the approach of growth, and that seems fairly uniform across the stages. But clearly, if you are to grow the business, you have to change something, right? Needs or understanding changes. So talk to us a little bit about that. First, you, Michal, tell us, as you have entered a new market, as sort of the user base or the revenue numbers grow, or you add more product lines, what is the approach that you've taken in terms of managing or changing? Please tell us a little bit.
Yeah. So I think as you enter in the world of B2C and in e-commerce specifically, as you enter a new market, you really are focused first on getting in customers. You are willing to lose money on acquiring them. You're willing to even lose money on the products themselves that you sell, but you just need to get in as many customers as possible. And that's really the focus. And so there's, and obviously when you just start, let's be clear, like you're not going to get much organic traffic. And so it really is a paid traffic, partnership, affiliates focus whenever you start building the business, really at the start. Once you actually get enough of that, that's when you start thinking about your basket mix. What is it that you're actually selling to them? And how are you creating within the basket mix, one, revenue and profitability, but also enough unique products that will create loyalty with that customer, that will allow you to get to that retention later on. So you start with really the revenue, then you start thinking about the basket size, then you really start focusing on the retention. And when you look at retention, it really depends on, again, on the business. If it is a general merchandising business, you basically look at frequency of purchase and you start seeing like, okay, how often are they coming back? When it is something like a grocery business, or when it's something like food delivery, rather than looking at the frequency of them coming back over a period of months, you actually start tracking how many can you get for a second purchase and a third purchase and a fourth, because you really quickly identify, and again, it really depends on the business, but you identify how many purchases do you need, or what specific items do you need for them to shop. And then you focus on getting them, to cross that barrier. So if it's a grocery business, for example, you want them to shop 3 times over an 8 weeks period. And so you start getting them from the first to the second, from the second to the third. If it's a apparel business, for example, if you can get them to shop kids' clothes with you, they're hooked, right? And so it really depends on what you're trying to get. So you start with the customers, you move to the basket size, you move to the frequency, and then, well, along the way, but then really is when you really start looking just at market share. So rather than looking at your revenue in terms of growth, you really start looking at where you are as compared to your competitors. And once you start looking at market share, that's when you actually start looking at the additional verticals. So you start with your one vertical, whatever it is that you're focused on, and that's when you add on more. So again, in my situation with various markets, I have markets that started with just a general merchandising business, just have your own products that you sell. You realize you've gained enough customers, now you start building in a marketplace. You've gained more customers, now you start bringing in on-demand services. And so your growth comes from building in these additional verticals, while every time with each one that you build, you focus on getting customers first, building the right basket size, and getting the retention.
Excellent.
Makes sense.
I think, over to you, Manoj, and we'll try to do now a little more rapid fire as we are running out of time. But please, please tell us a little bit about, how you've evolved the organization or your approach to growth as, Zscaler has scaled, from a scrappy startup to a $500 million company. Tell us a little bit about that.
So actually, one difference I would make, as I was listening to Michal, when you get into new markets or you get into a market in enterprise, one of the things that is different about B2B is this thing called Gartner, IDC, Forrester, that Michal has to not worry about at all, right? It's not like you go to a Gartner report, look at where is Walmart on
the magic quadrant.
Yeah, on a magic quadrant. Yeah, we have to also be very, very cognizant of that, right? Because there is a lot of work that product management has to put in order to facilitate growth, to ensure that the analyst community actually is working with you. You are hearing their inputs, you are providing inputs that you are gathering from your customers, and ensuring that that goes hand in hand, right? We have been fortunate with Gartner. The latest Magic Quadrant came out a month ago, and we are the only leader in our sector now. Right? When we started, there were like 6-7 leaders, and they're still all there. They're just not with us, right? They're either laggards or visionaries, which is fantastic. But that is an important aspect to ensure that growth happens, because that is how you get shortlisted. into the market of your choice. So if you choose large enterprise as a market, you have to go make sure that the analyst community is talking about you the same way as you think of yourself. In terms of growth and changes, numerous things change, right? When you are little, as Michal said, you can't go and talk to General Electric as yourself, like who's Zscaler, right? Nobody wants to talk to a 5-people company. So the channels, the partners, the advocates like analysts become a part of your customer base that you are actually pitching to, your building product towards them as well, so that they are excited about taking you in to their prospects. So there's a lot of focus in the initial days on what does my channel need, what do my partners need as well, so that I'm building products that help my partners do their business better as well. So early on, as Zscaler started, service providers were a huge part of our business. So we had very thick relationships, still do, with our service providers to understand what their needs are, just as much as I understand the needs of a Nestle or a Siemens, right? And so, so that was very, very important early on for us to understand. As you start growing and your customer base grows much larger than the service provider, then your focus shifts much more on the end user. It doesn't take away from the job of the product manager, though. It just makes it 20 times worse, because now you have to take care of everyone, right? And so, but at the end of the day, as we've grown the organization, creating verticals, creating chewable pieces, right? When you're small, you're like looking at all of it as one chunk. As you start growing, Japan is very different from US federal, is very different from large enterprise to mid-market. And so you start creating differentiation, you start creating expertise in your product management into specific vertical areas. But while you do all of that, what you cannot afford to do is lose touch with your end customer, right? So you have to have product managers in theater. You have to have your product managers with your employees. So what happens is, as you grow, invariably you are going to do acquisitions. You are going to have teams in Bangalore, in Chandigarh, in our case, Poland, and everywhere else in the world, right? And so how do you make sure that everyone is working together is you actually have to have product management localized with engineering as well. So creates new challenges, creates more sleepless hours, but that's how it all grows.
Okay, excellent. I think it's great that you also delved into a little bit of the org and the management and having product managers being close to it. And, Michal, you emphasized the research. I think I'm getting pinged that we are out of time, but I'd like to, just hand it over to each of you, maybe in 30 seconds, share us your closing thoughts. Michal, you go first, just tell us a little bit about, if for every product manager in the audience who's listening to you about growth, B2C growth, your top 3 things that they should keep an eye on, and then we'll summarize.
I think growth at the end of the day is just building a very good product. And so there's always empathy with the customer. There's always the data and really looking at, the where the customer is at, and then building an emotional connection with the customer. Building some loyalty with them is critical when you're trying to grow a product.
Perfect.
Excellent.
And actually, I'll echo Michal on all of it. One thing I would point to all the product managers in the audience is neither Michal nor I said anything about competition. Don't waste your time. Spend your time with your customers. Build the empathy, understand their needs, build the products for them. They will follow you. Competition will fall behind, right? A lot of product managers make the mistake of logging onto the competitor's website and say, oh man, they did this and this and this. We need to do you're already, whenever you look at a competitor's product and try to build that in yours, you are by definition second in the market, then why bother? Then there is no growth, right? Understand your customers' problems, solve your customers' problems for in a way that they have not imagined. The only thing I would leave, by the way, just as a last thought, is I always say this to my PMs or engineers is ask what the problem is, but not how to solve it. Come up with the how. Ask them the what, come up with the how with your engineers, and you will do a much better job.
Excellent. Excellent conversation. I'm actually quite surprised that there was so much common between the approaches, for a B2B and B2C, because a lot of people looking at it from outside think, hey, this is going to be very different. So thank you for that. I appreciate both of you joining us. Thank you for your perspective, and we'll route a lot of the audience questions which we couldn't answer to you. Hopefully you can take a few minutes and give us feedback on that. And with that, I'd like to close this session on growth. Very interesting. I will hand it over to Ujjwal Tikku for closing remarks. He's the VP of Product Management at Optum. And last but not the least, I'd like to thank all the volunteers who've been working tirelessly to make all of this happen, including volunteers from NASSCOM like Sahil, like Shreya, Nehal, who've been helping us organize this, all the kinds of logistics that has gone into it. So great seeing you both. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again in a future session, and hopefully we'll have more time for that. So thank you.